Alrighty, and hello everybody. This is Scott Walters, and you are on the Walters Wanderings Travel Podcast. This is episode number 15 already. 5, 10, 15. At least I don't have to show you my toes. Now remember, before the end of this year, 2020, any travel book for 2021, you will get an amazing offer, $21 off of each $1,000 of cruise fare or land fare. So pretty interesting stuff out there. Lots of places you can go to. Doesn't include airfare, doesn't include insurance, but it's still a great deal. $4,000 trip, you get $84 back. So today on my podcast, we have a special guest. His name is Billy Beck. Now, Billy is not the most orthodox fellow because he's a rock and roll guy, but he's not a player so much as does a stuff behind the scenes. So here he is, and he's going to talk about life on the road as a rocker, although it looks like he's in his home studio. Look at that.
Well, I've been an amateur guitar player since 1969, and I recently started picking up keyboards. And we haven't been able to work for nearly a year now. I'm a crew guy. I'm a stage lighting director. That's all I've done for 40 years. But there aren't any shows going on now. Everybody in my business is getting killed. So I'm using my stuff here in the home studio. I've got a bit of an echo here.
Let me turn down my volume and see if that helps. Hold on one second. Let me do this. Maybe you'll get less echo now.
Check test. Go ahead.
All right, so 40 years of doing lighting design and light hanging and dealing with all those lights. What's the biggest change from when you started to now?
Oh, automation, digital automation and processing of shows, and in terms of control. Everything we do now is, like a lot of life in America and the rest of the world, is dedicated computers. There are computers everywhere. So in the old days where we might drive a big wide console with 60 or 90 channels, and each one of those sent a discrete 10-volt signal back to a dimmer. Now we're talking to computers everywhere. And the revolution in moving lights beginning in the early 80s really got started with this, but it's all augmented by the larger revolution of digital control everywhere. So excuse me, I'm very sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
I'll see if I can mute that. Yeah, it's about systems study now and mastering digital controls. Like, we're all learning computers, and this may be inexplicable to people who didn't grow up in a time before computers were everywhere in our lives. The kids now these days, they just take it for granted, but for anybody who's been doing it that long, as long as I have, and there are a lot of us out there, that's been a big change. That's been the biggest.
Sure, because before you used to have sort of a set of lighting cues, and you had to literally press buttons at the right time or get screwed. Now you just load it all into a computer. But when they get on the stage, it's just sort of like, okay, let's go, and then boom, it just happens.
A lot of people do that. I'm a lot more old school. I like to stay intimately connected with the music note by note as much as I can. So I like to drive even modern systems like old school desks. But yeah, there's a lot of automated scripting. But a great deal of that is compelled now by the addition of things like video integrations in shows and things. So it has to be a little more tightly scripted. But a good director can stay on top of that. The way I do it, it's a difference in style, But it's prevalent. There's a lot more scripting to it now.
Now, give us some of the artists that you've actually lit for, to give us a who's who, or maybe it's a shorter list if you give us a list of who you haven't.
That's funny. I never got to work with the Who. I know people who have. My brother has. I grew up wanting to do. It's funny. I wanted to direct guitar-driven rock shows. I wanted to work with people like Blue Oyster Cult and Aerosmith, and a great deal of my career has gone into R&B. which I never saw coming, and I've had a great time. But in the meantime, I have never laid eyes on Blue Oyster Cult live. Everybody else I know has and worked with them and all that. I never have, things like that. I was able to do, but it hasn't just been rock and roll. I worked with a company called R.A. Roth Incorporated out of Atlanta for about 14 years. And one of the great things that I got to do with them in 1989, when the Bolshoi Ballet sent a repertory company over here to America, I got to do their first American tour. I took a cut and pay and worked as a second electrician just to do that gig because it was so cool.
Well, there you go. No, let's listen. Sometimes you do it for the art as much as you do it for the money. There's no doubt.
I was invited to do that, and I thought, yes, I want to go do that. So we spent 6 weeks running across America. It was their first time here. This is 1989, before the collapse of the wall, right? And it was a wonderful thing to watch that. Now,
when you say you travel, what kind of accommodations? I mean, when you're on the road, I mean, is it really in the bus, or do you actually stay in hotels sometimes? I mean, how does that whole thing work?
It depends on the gig, the tour, and the job that you're doing. Excuse me. I haven't been on a coach tour. I haven't rolled across America in 20 years now, believe it or not. The last time I did that was with Peter Frampton in 1999. And so ever since then, I've been working with Mr. P. Bro Bryson, an R&B singer with a long record.
Sure, storied history. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and we've been flying everywhere. So that was a whole different thing to me after 20 years of running around on coach tours. Now, when you're doing that, when you're on a bus, yes, it'll be 5 or 7 or 9 cities in a row on the bus, night to night. And so on a tour like that, you don't get to see a heck of a lot except the arena day to day.
I
would think it's a really glamorous thing. You're going to go out and tour America. Well, yeah, you do, but sometimes you don't see a lot because you're working.
You're in the Worcester Centrum day 1. You're at the Albany Pepsi Center day 2. You're, over in Buffalo day 3. You're down to Pittsburgh day 4. Then you go to Cincinnati. Then you go to Cleveland. Yep. Why they did it that way, you don't know. It's
darts at the board, and then pretty soon you're getting that arena tan on. You're looking good and pasty.
That's right, because again, you're either in the bus or you're in the arena. Now, when it comes to setting up the lights for a show, how long does it take for a typical show to be actually set up in the arena or stage space?
Typically, an arena show, these things are scaled. Say a 2,500 seat theater show would be scaled differently from a 18,000 seat arena show, which would be scaled differently from a, say, 60,000 seat stadium show. On an arena day, typically, and there are some variations in this. I mean, some people ran heavier tours than others. But I've run with shows, for instance, Hank Williams Jr., where we were carrying 600 instruments around, lighting instruments. That was as big as Van Halen that year. And we would get in the morning at 7:30, and we would have the whole thing off the ground and ready to start shooting a focus by 1:30, something on that order.
And then you have the show to do. Now, are you involved in that breakdown afterwards too? I mean,
oh yes, sir. And that goes a lot more quickly, believe it or not. It's always
sure. Breaking down's always much quicker. Just
bang,
like Christmas decorations,
We were proud of ourselves. We could take that show from a full stage to a full truck in a little over 2 hours.
Exactly. No, the breakdowns are always faster than the setups because there's always more nuance in the setup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to take more care.
That's right. Now,
you can break down dimmer racks just walking along, unplugging stuff and throw them in boxes. But in the morning, when you want to plug that in, it's a little more involved, and that adds up.
Right, and then you're in a new space a lot of times, so you have to also take and it may be a space that's new to you. Now, what's your favorite venue to set up your shows in?
No, it's difficult to talk about a single favorite when I've seen so many. In general, I prefer theaters. I like old Victorian theaters.
Right, those old opera house type places.
Exactly. I love those.
Yeah, they have maybe 2,000 seats, and they're more intimate. The artist can be more intimately involved with the audience and all of that. Sure.
No,
I,
the architecture also attracts me. I mean, I've spent time climbing around and lost in those spaces, and you know, I'll take a walk up to the far corner of the balcony just to look at the house to see what it looks like from there, and I just love the way they're done.
No, a lot of those spaces really have stood the test of time compared to some of these other things that are rather generic and sterile. You know, it's just, I mean, goes to show you like that. Now, what about outdoor venues? Give us a story from an outdoor venue that might be memorable or humorous.
You outdoor venues can be touchy, and mainly because of the basic metaphysics of the thing. You're outdoors, and no matter how hard they try to adapt to possible weather conditions, it can be difficult sometimes. I remember, I think it was 1988. I was a rigger on Leonard Skinner, and we were, I think it was Houston, in an outdoor venue. I don't remember which one. It's a typical shed affair, and we had the opening act on. I don't recall who it was, and we're about to put Skinner on, and the roof began to leak in the venue. It was a rainstorm. The roof began to leak in the venue directly over the front of house mix position.
Oh, nice! Talk about short circuit.
Oh, I'm trying to recall. It dropped 40 or 50 gallons of water in a deluge right on the mix. The audio console, we cracked it open. It failed. We cracked it open, and there was about 2 inches of water laying in the bottom of the console, and we had to cancel that show. That can happen.
So. I would think so. Now, any appearances when you've been traveling and you do an outdoor place, say you go like to higher elevations, anytime you've seen snow before setup or during a setup or not?
I don't think I've ever seen that. That might stick out of my memory, but I don't think I've ever seen it. I can think of lots of places with real potential, but ordinarily, seasonal schedules will account for that, and you generally won't end up in that kind of a circumstance.
No, I understand that. Now, what about foreign places? Where have you traveled outside of the country that you have fond memories of?
Oh Lord! Every time it's memorable. Every time you go out of the country. My experience centers mostly on Asia, a little less on Europe, and a little less on Africa after that. I have really enjoyed Asia.
Tokyo or
to a degree I wouldn't have imagined in the rest of my life, before I actually got to do it.
So there's a lot of good stuff. Now, what about the worst performer to actually work with?
I don't like to talk about those.
Smart move.
I once had a discussion with a leader in the production industry I was working with. We were sitting in his office one day, and the man's led a very interesting life, and we were idling on the idea of doing his biography. And after a bit of discussion, we concluded that if you were going to do something like that and you were going to name names in the business, you pretty much had to decide that you were done in the business, because you would be done in the business.
Sure, of course. I understand that.
Right. And so that's my general guiding principle.
So there have been some people who've been really not exactly nice people who maybe on the outside or otherwise give this persona of being really super nice.
Oh yeah, you see that. You can see that.
Now, what about the opposite? What about your favorite person to work
with? Those are the ones I love to talk about. And Miss Bonnie Raitt was just as sweet as she could be to me the first day we met.
And I saw Bonnie Raitt in a very small venue in Burlington, Vermont years ago. And yeah, it was also general admission. I love those days when you had a general admission concert, you ride up close, and
yep.
I had the bouquet of roses, and she sang the Montgomery song, and I was like, oh, I was in love, So
that woman is what you see on stage. That's who she is. She's just a sweetheart.
There you go. That's a good one.
The first day we worked together, it was a place called Center Stage in Atlanta, and I was in the lights console, at the lights console in the booth, perhaps 100 50 feet away from her. She walked on stage and looked me in the eye from that distance and said, "Hi, Billy." That was the first thing she ever said to me. Right.
Well, that's very nice. There's no doubt.
Yeah, just like that. You know,
very nice.
She's the kind of person she is interested in every aspect of her work, including her live production. And I mean, I've worked with people who wouldn't know a spotlight if you dropped it on their heads. She's not like that. She sees everything that's going on. She's interested. She was able to direct me and tell me what she wanted, and that's always wonderful.
Well, that's good. That is excellent. Like I said, I've always enjoyed her music, and you know, she's always seemed to be rather sincere persona. You know, and
yeah.
Now, what about group? A group? Do you ever get to hang out with these people after shows, or are you too busy putting stuff away?
No, sometimes it's necessarily that way. I have worked as a rigger. Okay, that's the person who goes in and hangs the stuff in the morning. Okay. I have worked as an electrician, which is they're the people who actually, riggers take responsibility for hanging everything associated with the show, including audio, scenics, anything else that has to fly. Electricians plug lights. We also can serve electrical needs for the rest of the production. I've been a master electrician several times, and I have to supply electricity to audio, video, other production elements. Now I've worked as a designer and director, which means I don't do any of that stuff. Okay, I'm exclusively devoted to how the show's going to look and execute and play during the concert. As a director, you'll tend to, depending on the artist's interest, like Miss Ray, for instance, right? She had notes for me when we first met, the things that she wanted to see. Depending on the artist's interest, you'll necessarily sometimes work a lot more closely with an artist as a director and designer for those kinds of reasons. What do you want to see? How can I help you do it? Do you have any ideas for me? That kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah. So
there's some people that you know. Now, have you ever been starstruck?
Not that I really remember, although I could describe, I'll tell you what, being really honest here, I could describe a couple of opportunities I missed in my career. And I won't go into detail or name names, but they're names that everybody would know. Because, and this is more about me than them or the circumstance, because it didn't occur to me that they would want to spend time with me. I tend to just personally observe the distinctions between artists and support types. And I've had people in my life refer to me as an artist, and I try to quickly correct them. No, I'm a craftsman, and I know the difference. I'm not on the team here. Just accept
right. No,
to my limited degree of my department.
Right. You have a different role. Although one could say if you do create the lighting essence, you are kind of artistic in doing that.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. I agree. I'm also an amateur philosopher all my life.
Well, aren't we all? We should be.
Everyone should be aware that they are. Right. So I analyze this somewhat technically. I understand the interpretive assistance that I bring to the essence of the project. You see.
There you go. Now, is there a show that you wish you could have worked on besides Blue Oyster Cult, perhaps?
Many.
Many. Give us an example of a show that you have. What about an example of a show that you saw that was really well lit and all those technical aspects really were solid and the music was just as good?
A man named Jonathan Smeaton directed and designed for Peter Gabriel about 87, 88. And he did something with that tour that was... I don't like buzzwords. I don't like the reduction of the language in modern culture to the sort of parrot speak that we always hear. And I loathe the phrase out of the box thinking.
Right.
but just to get a thumbnail on what Jonathan did with that year, it opened the frame of the stage the way he did that. What he did was he laid down a circular track all the way around the band and mounted moving lights on camera jibs like you would see in Hollywood, these big cranes, and they were choreographed into the show minute by minute, cue to cue. It was a wonderful thing. And the rest of his design was somewhat dramatically asymmetrical, where a lot of rock show designs, you'll see mirrored image lighting from both sides, that sort of thing, right? Symmetrical arrays. Jonathan wasn't doing that, and he did most of it in no color. It was a drastic departure from anything I'd ever seen, and it opened my mind to possibilities. He had
creative and innovative, and that obviously. Now, was that the Sledgehammer tour?
I don't recall. I'd have to go look this up. I saw it once in Syracuse. I actually bought a ticket for that show, and that's not something I was accustomed to doing in those years, right?
Yeah, I've only been a buyer of tickets myself through my history, but now that I know you, maybe I can get in for free. You never know.
It depends on what's going on. Yeah,
it depends on
it's not like it used to be in the old days either. Aspect of it.
I'm sure papering houses with all the different costs and all the accounting stuff that goes on maybe doesn't happen so much anymore.
Probably not.
No. So this has been a very fascinating conversation. Is there anything in personal travel that has nothing to do with being on the road that you want to share? Any memorable stories of a personal trip you've ever taken, or maybe back in the day with your folks or whatever?
It seems, looking back at my life, it seems that I was groomed and almost born to this. I mean, we were traveling very early on. I recall flying with my parents to Tripoli, Libya. It must have been about 1958, I'm thinking. 59 perhaps. I was very young. I was like 3.5 years old, on a military C-121 Lockheed Constellation. My dad was Air Force, and we traveled all our lives. It's a rhythm of my life to me. I've been on my road, on the move, on the road all my life, and it wasn't conscious that I would go into rock show touring because I wanted to travel or anything like that. Although I was excited at the prospects. I always have been. I love to travel. But it's been a great continuity from Dad's Air Force career to my own work on rock shows. I love to move, and I've always gotten to. It's been a blessing.
Now, is there any place you haven't visited yet or been to that you really want to go to?
I once considered shipping my Harley Davidson Sportster to perhaps Marseille in the summertime, with the idea of riding to St. Petersburg, Russia. I'd love to see that place. And it was a big project, and I had other things to do. I learned to fly, for instance, and things move around in your life. I never got to do that. But St. Petersburg has always had an allure for me. And if I were going to see Italy, Rome would not be my first stop. It would be Florence, because of the intensity of the architecture and art there, and its connection in history as the virtual birth of the Renaissance.
Having been to Florence, I can vouch that it's really a special place. There's no doubt.
I'd love to see the Duomo. A good friend of mine got there and got to climb it, and what he described was just
the climb is incredible. It's very claustrophobic, like all the climbs are.
It looks like I was looking at the photographs,
and you can see overlooking that whole countryside. It really is amazing. I've done that, so I can speak.
Oh, good for you, man.
Yeah, I've done that. It's like I say, it gets a little tight. My wife, she begged off. She says, "Oh no, I'm not doing that." But me, there I was. I had to. Oh. She told me how to use her camera, and there you go. Mm-hmm. So listen, it's been great fun talking with you. Get the little travel and the rock and roll experience from back scenes, because it's sometimes more important to hear what goes on behind the scenes, because we all know what the finished product basically is like. We see that anytime we go to see a show. So I really appreciate it, Billy. I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to let my audience go in just a second. So thank you so much, and happy holidays, all right?
Same to you, Scott, and thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. So that was Billy Beck, an amazing story of a rock and roller going everywhere around the world, not only doing rock and roll but other stuff. And again, you can rock and roll into 2021. Get your revenge on 2020 by booking travel with the Go Away Often Travel. Just get in touch to go away. Thank you so much. Have a great day.